So I have a confession to make. I love this time of year. I love the lights. I love the specialty foods. I love how everyone's cheerful. I really like this season. I even like Christmas carols because here's a little rabbi trivia. In high school and college, I would make some of my pocket money by professionally singing Christmas carols in quartets. So I know all the words. It's true that sometimes I feel irritated when I'm greeted with a presumptive Merry Christmas, as if everyone in this diverse metroplex was Christian. And the first year we moved here, I was the room mother in my daughter's class, and as we were planning the holiday party, I had to explain to the other room mother that a latke was not a beverage. But despite these minor annoyances, I love the overall hope and joy that comes with this season. And yet for some people, December, or if you prefer Kislev and Tevet, are the most difficult time of year. People have seasonal depression because the days are so short. Some of us are longing for loved ones who have died or who have divorced us or broken up with us because we're watching other people go to Hanukkah parties and New Year's Eve parties and vacations with their loved ones. Sometimes people feel their loneliest and saddest in this month. And so this sermon is for you because we learn about Jacob's sorrow when he was parted from his beloved son Joseph, and how he rediscovered joy and was able to live again. In case you missed the last few weeks' episodes, Joseph, Jacob's favorite child, was sold to slavery in Egypt, and the rest of his children told him Joseph was dead, at which point Jacob went into an extended period of mourning. And it's not until this week, which is years and years later in the story, that Jacob is finally reunited with Joseph. And when he sees him for the first time after this separation, he says, "Now I can die, having seen for myself that you are still alive." Pretty intense words. The Kliakar, who lived in the 17th century in Prague, explains them. He says that when Jacob believed his son Joseph was dead, a part of him died too. He still breathed, he still ate, but he wasn't really living. The great Israeli poet Zelda puts it like this: "Because in my case, with each sorrow, the chambers lock." She's describing a world where grief and depression lock us inside. The Kliakar continues his explanation. He says, however, next week, when we read about the end of Jacob's life, it tells us a few things. It says he had 17 years with his son Joseph in Egypt. And it tells us that he, at the end of his life, says, "I lived to be 147 years. This reunion with Joseph brought him back to life. And he included all the years of his life when he said how old he was on his deathbed. Those empty, shadowed days had become now, at least in his memory and heart, days he could claim as fully lived. So what is the point of this text? Jacob went through a long period of life when he felt lonely and sad, and the pain was so intense he couldn't really imagine a time where he would feel truly happy again, and yet he did. Now, in Jacob's case, things are a little unusual because in a plot twist, he discovers that the person he thought was dead was actually alive. And as a rabbi, I have never found someone who returned to finding joy in life because the person they lost was actually still living. It doesn't usually work that way. More often, though, while I see people at the beginning of grief or depression think they will never be happy again, sure enough, gradually over time, they do discover happiness again. So how do we heal? How do we find a way to live fully again? There's an analogy in the Talmud that might help. In Rosh Hashanah 27b, it's teaching the halakha of what shofars are kosher. And it says, a broken shofar cannot make a clear and good sound, therefore it cannot be used. Now, if you'd like to repair this shofar, it says do not take bits and pieces from other shofars to repair it. Rather, take a small piece from somewhere on the shofar that isn't critical to the sound and use it to patch what has been cracked or punctured. It has to be healed with its own material, somewhat like a doctor taking a skin graft from one area of a patient's body to heal another area. The healing has to come from within, and the same is true of grief or depression. No one can grieve or move through the depression for you, though we can walk by your side and support you as you find your way back to the light. How do you do that? Well, I know some of you know what I'm going to say already, but I think it's worth saying at this season when sometimes people aren't doing so well emotionally and spiritually. Number one, you have to allow yourself to feel your feelings. You really can't move on until you've felt them. Number two, at some point you have to acknowledge and accept that the world is not in our control and that it is full of change and loss. Number three, you have to open yourself up to noticing what is still beautiful about the world, even if it's a small thing. Number four, allow your friends, your family, your mental health professionals, and clergy to love you and help you. Number five, keep engaging in the world, even in small ways, so you do not become isolated. And number six, if you are a person of faith, trust that this is part of a divine plan and you will understand someday. And if you're not a person of faith, you can tell anyone who tries to force this theology upon you exactly where they can put that sentiment. These are the actions to take to live fully and joyfully again. They are not easy, but they are simple. As we approach the solstice, the longest night of the year in the northern hemisphere, it's no coincidence that around the northern hemisphere we celebrate light, whether it's in the form of a Chanukiah or a star over Bethlehem or something else. For those of us that feel joy and festivity at this time of year, please remember to include the people around you who you know have low spirits. And for those that are feeling a darkness of the soul right now, you're not alone. And I want you to remember what happens after the longest night of the year. The next night is a little shorter. And the night after that is shorter still. Shabbat Shalom.